There's going to be, yes.
Oh, I don't want to finish and then
No, that's okay.
Well, I was just going to say, also, I was just thinking, like, when I've been in different places, even throughout this country, storms are different. Just the way the weather is. Like in Florida, it's warm and wet. You know, when I was in Kansas, I, had heard about thunderstorms. I thought someone had a World War II movie going on too loud in the next room. Here in Southern California, there's kind of a chill in the air. Northern California, the wind sounds like someone's sucking in on a harmonica. I mean, it's so different depending where you're
And how fast they come up and go away.
Yeah,
That
I love
doesn't
all
happen
this.
here.
I love all this because you really take a person. When I just came back from California, and I remember from Florida, the first time I went to Florida, I honestly felt like I was breathing humidity. Like I was breathing water. I was like, oh my gosh, how do people breathe this air?
And it feels like it weighs you down. Like it's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very oppressive.
Well, and then it's going to feel different to somebody who's born in Florida.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
opposed to someone who's lived in California all their life, very dry air, and goes to Florida on a vacation.
like, and if you're writing a historical or a time travel, imagine wearing 7 pounds of underwear in that humidity.
And dancing.
Yeah.
And what?
I mean, like, if you're in the South, in the middle of summer, in some of the clothing, you're like, are you kidding me?
Yes.
And were you,
A bustle?
were you going to wear a corset that made it very difficult to breathe in that?
Anyway,
Yes.
yeah.
I remember one story. I'm sorry to keep talking about my stories, of course, that's what I remember most. One story, the hero, because he was saving the heroine in water, and he just cut off her dress, because it was weighing her down. He just went, enough of this, life is more important than your dress, sorry.
Well, there's some dresses, like in the Renaissance, they used to put all their jewels on their dresses.
I have a dress I was married in that has beads on it. That thing's heavy.
No, but their dresses could actually weigh up to 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And they had certain dresses where you would walk a step forward and then sort of stop. And they had these dresses, and dances where you'd like basically go up on your toes, walk forward a step, go down on your heels, turn slightly. They were these very stately dances. But the dresses could be so heavy
Like you couldn't move
that
one.
if you did some wild dress, you were just going to go, like when you stopped, the dress kept going, you were going to fall. It's like, it's not going to happen. And then when that dress got old, you took all the jewels off and gave it to, the next person or whatever, and that dress kept being worn until it might be some beggar was wearing these total rags that, and that's why they had the beggars in rags, because everything just kept getting worn and kept getting passed down forever,
Yeah.
forever and ever and ever, until it was nothing.
Right.
They also removed the lace.
And
Anything
yes.
that cost money, they would remove it before they gave it to the next.
Now, does anybody feel like you kind of got put there by her talking? Just her talking about it, you get right into that era. And this is all part of your setting. It's the most vital part of your setting, what you're talking about there. What I'm talking about, here, like get pictures and that sort of thing is also important. But what you're talking about is so much more important. And how does she feel about it? And how does it make her feel? And how about the hero who has to pick her up?
Do you use
I used to
diaries?
up those stairs,
Do you use diaries from people of that time period at all?
Sometimes, yes, because I like to get, instead of our view of it now, I like to get what people were thinking, the mindset of the people there.
There's so many ideas, like I've been doing this whole study for my class on beauty and what people see as beautiful over different time periods and different cultures and what they will do to achieve beauty. But, especially women.
Of course,
Amazing, amazing things.
of course. We all understand
Although
this.
historically men were detoxing.
No, they are.
No, I don't mean like nowadays. If men nowadays went back in time, they would be considered very dull dressers. Historically, men wore tons of lace and powdered wigs as big as women's and high heels because it was better to walk through the streets. And but now men would go back and people would be like, "Well, you are of no class."
It depends on the culture too, because you go back to certain cultures like Egypt
or in Africa, some places in Australia, they still do head shaving.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll tell you what, if you want to know who belongs to what culture, if you take the baby and you change the head shape, you're never going to guess wrong whether this person belongs to your group or not.
That's right,
You know, it's like their head looks different.
Yeah.
that's right.
And
Okay,
all sorts of things.
so where are we? Do we, how long do I have? Do we have time to get into story or what, how much?
I would say just take some questions about
Yeah,
this.
stop
It
putting
seems,
yourself on.
5 minutes?
yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just, let me say a few things about it that I found interesting. Okay, story. Let me go back. I found that derivation of story interesting. I looked up both of these words, you know, just to get my feel of it. Did you know that the definition of story is history? I had no idea. History.
Close, yeah.
Is.
Yeah, it comes from the Latin historia, which comes from the Greek,
And story.
yeah, which means inquiry, records, history, is the actual derivation of the word story. I found that fascinating. Anyway, okay. We all tell stories differently, and so it's hard for me to tell you to write in the same way that I write. Because we all have to find what works for us. That's probably the most important thing, is what works for one person may not work for another person, but may work for another person. So I'll tell you how I work, because that's what I know best. When it comes to story, I work by scenes. And I tell an entire story sometimes, just to get to a particular scene. My whole first book was written about a scene of the hero and heroine dancing together, and all the people watching this Indian and this woman dancing together. The whole book was written to get to this scene, and how it could come about, and why he knew the dances, and blah, 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 and why they were together, and all that. The whole story was based on that. And so usually that is how a book materializes for me. I would get a scene, and then I get other scenes that lead to that scene. And then, but I write scene to scene to scene to scene. How do you write?
I usually start with a scene and then add on. I don't usually have like a pivotal scene that's later in the book. I usually have like an opening scene that comes to me. But I don't recommend my way to anybody. I'm an envy of people who can sit down and like plot a book out and they know what's going to happen. It's not that way for me.
It's not that way for me either. And then you were answering the question too. Do you write scene by scene?
I feel exactly like you do. I couldn't write a whole book about a whole scene. I want to go little by little. I don't know what's going to happen in the rest of the book.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so anyway, that is how, when I am writing a synopsis, by the way, that you have to write for an editor, I write it scene by scene by scene. I have usually a scene that I start with, and then I get to it, and then what happens after that. And I don't know if you found this to be the case, but usually my synopsis really has nothing to do with the story that I eventually write. You know, sometimes it is a guide, you know, particularly if I'm under deadline. I have 2 months to write my next book, and I'm very concerned about it. So oftentimes it'll be a guide when I'm pressed on time. Now, for any of you who have trouble writing under deadline or have writer's block, I just want you to know that I'm giving a talk on writer's block at the OCC RWA meeting in Orange County next weekend. It's on Saturday.
I'll be there. I'm a member there anyway.
Oh, you are? Okay, yeah. So I'm giving a very specific talk on writer's block. By the way, you guys were at my last talk. Did you find that helpful, the talk on writer's block?
Yes, absolutely. I go back to it frequently.
Good, because I'm going to do probably a very similar talk on it at OCC.